Hello and welcome back to Talon 101. This time, we need to talk about LFS Forward 3. Because that's right, it's a heat engager now. Compared to CD3, it's just like, oh, did CD3 get anything then? No, it didn't. So let's start with LFS Forward 3 first, right? So this move is still 19 frames. If it does hit the opponent, it's a heat engager. And of course, if you don't have heat anymore, well, it's basically the same as CD3. It's gonna knock the opponent down on the floor. And it is +4 on block. There's a lot of space on this move on block, which gives the opponent more opportunities to step. So if the opponent decides to sidewalk towards the left, unfortunately, you only have two options. Well, it's two options with an asterisk. Technically one with an asterisk, because LFS down 4 will 100% track there. Most especially against Lily. Like, Lily's already the cream of the crop in terms of sidestepping. But your back 4-3 will not hit. Now, again, that is against Lily, but for the most part, it can lose to sidewalk left, but it usually will be catching sidestep left. That's why it's with an asterisk, because you don't really have much of a choice to press this button, because even against sidestep right or sidewalk right, you still need to press LFS back 4-3, because the second hit of LFS back 4-3 will catch. And if you're worried of the fact that the first move whiffed, then you use a move like LFS DF3, because that will actually hit the opponent. And if not that, you can always risk LFS of forward 4. However, these three mids, well, that's a big asterisk if I change this to sidewalk right, because there you go, LFS back 4-3. That's a second hit. You can get punished in that time. And then DF3, only the second hit again, but there's so much time before they even, like, the second hit comes to them. And then, of course, LFS of forward 4. Switch Plasma Blade. So your only true reliable option is LFS down 4. So to simplify it, LFS back 4-3 for both sidestep left and sidestep right with an asterisk. And then LFS down 4 as your main go-to low. Like, you can't even use down 3-4. Like, again, the second hit will catch there, and if we change this to sidewalk left, it doesn't even catch. So yeah, it's pretty tough. But if they decide to backdash, because if they want to backdash, right? Like stuff like LFS 1 and LFS 2 would whiff. But of course, you're going back to LFS back 4-3, because the second hit catches. That's an asterisk. The next thing is LFS DF3. This is less of an asterisk, but it is a power crush. So if they decide to backdash and press a low where you're going to lose, or grab LFS forward 3 into another LFS forward 3, right? If they're backdashing. Switch Plasma Blade will still work here. And yeah, LFS down 4. That has never changed. And the biggest thing here, since it is +4 in left flamingo, if your opponent decides to power crush, or if they decide to rage art, you are in a very, very tricky situation. Why? So if you're gonna default to LFS back 4-3, because that's gonna, potentially catch both sidestep left and sidestep right, and even backdash, if they power crush, you lost. Now, granted, you did do a lot of damage there, equal to like the damage they did to you. But if you didn't want to get hit and like wake up on Oki and give them momentum, it's like, what do you do? Because you obviously can't do DF3, you'll lose to the other power crush. You can't do another LFS forward 3, you'll also still lose. And you can't do switch Plasma Blade either. So like, okay, so the one thing you can do is LFS down 4, because power crushes lose to lows, right? That's great. However, if they decide to, let's say, do a rage art, well, you died. So now, you're forced to risk options that would lose to basically sidestep left, sidestep right, and backdash. So you're gonna do something like LFS 1, and now you're safe. Or you'll do something like LFS 2, and then now you're safe. But they can backdash both those options, and they can sidestep both those options. And, well, unfortunately, they can also rage art both these options. So that's LFS 2. And then if I change this to LFS 1, yeah, it's tough out here. So it's just like, okay, maybe it's a bit better for CD3. A bit. It is a bit better. So number one is that the frame data is more or less the same. So if LFS forward 3 was 19 frames, this is faster by 1 frame, 18 to 19 frames. It's also +4 on block and keeps Hwoarang in LFS. But look at the distance on block compared to LFS forward 3. and then CD3. So Hwoarang's like right in front of their face. So this is gonna, change how moves track. But prior to that, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's focus on Okizeme. So like if you use LFS forward 3 without heat, or if heat's already active and you didn't want to spend heat dash, the same thing with CD3. Your Oki, basically a DF3 cancel into any LFS option, always. Or you can LFS cancel. No, you can do a move in LFS, like whiff a move, and then like just do any other move you want. So my main recommendation, usually, is after the cancel, you do LFS forward 3. And if not LFS forward 3, you do down 4. Because that will catch most options generally. Now, if you're not gonna do that, doing FF3 with a dash, you must do a dash with FF3. That way you can actually catch an opponent here. Feel free to test this out more in the lab. But these are like the general Oki options you can typically do. Of course, you can go more crazy with it. Let's say you whiff into RFF and then good old RFF DF3. But yeah, now let's go to sidesteps. So CD3 is kind of in the same boat as LFS forward 3. So this is a big asterisk again, so only down 4 is your reliable option if they decide to walk or step towards the left. Because back 4-3, you saw that? What was that? Then if we change it to sidestep or sidewalk right, again, you're still sticking with, LFS back 4-3. And then LFS DF3, because these moves will catch versus sidestep right. And then of course, switch plasma blade, LFS of forward 4. And then if the opponent does decide to move, that's an LFS down 4. And now interestingly, where if as long as they sidestep right and not sidewalk right, you can throw out a down 3-4. So you have more asterisks across the board. But those are pretty much the only options you can use, because still, despite being closer, LFS 2 doesn't hit there. And that does put you in the same spot against Backdash. It's just that compared to LFS forward 3 in terms of like your options, basically everything here works except LFS 1. So if your opponent is awake to punish you after your LFS 1, well, it's gonna be a tough time, because now you're gonna be forced to like do DF3 or LFS 3, which will lose to like sidestep, and then like LFS 2, and then you go into like the 50-50s of your down 3-4 or your LFS down 4. So it's only LFS 1 that doesn't win. But it's still a tricky situation nonetheless, because the number of options you have to catch towards sidestep right and sidestep left are limited. And like your opponent knows that you're kind of like forced to like rely on combat low, LFS down 4, and LFS back 4-3 for the most part. And then they're just gonna think about, oh yeah, there's gonna be DF3 as well. Now if they do challenge, this is a little bit better, because you're in front of their face. So same stuff will keep you safer. And you're not allowed to, of course, again, you're not allowed to do that. But like, you're a little bit more comfortable to throw out LFS 1 because of the distance between you and your opponent compared to after LFS forward 3. But if they rage art, well, you're kind of stuck in the same boat. See, that was LFS 1. You lose to rage art. Change this to LFS 2. You still lose to rage art. It's a pretty tough scenario to be in. So you can kind of think of this situation, LFS forward 3 on block and CD3 on block, to be like checkmate. Most especially if the opponent has rage. So if you are in a game and you're playing against an opponent that has rage, you may want to double second guess yourself. So like pressing LFS forward 3 or CD3. Most especially if your HP is low. Like if your HP is high enough that you can tank a rage art, then fine, go ahead. Because one of the few ways that you could supposedly avoid a rage art is that you do both moves, LFS forward 3 or CD3, and then you sidestep right, and then you start mashing back 1. Although, when I was labbing this earlier, I was not avoiding Lily's rage art, like at all. But this is what I remember. Like it was the only way you could do it. So you may need to go into the lab and play around with it more, because this is the only way you could avoid rage arts in Flamingo. Most especially with like the rage art change that they have made. So it's tough out here, and that's what both moves share on block. Now, one difference that they have is that LFS forward 3 does no chip damage, but CD3 does. You see that? So you do 8 recoverable health damage towards your opponent. So that makes it a little bit more valuable to throw out CD3. So it may have lost its wall bounce, but it does chip. And like you can do something extremely safe like LFS1, or you can like bank it on LFS back 4-3. So let's say you do that sequence, right? CD3 into back 4-3. You did 14 chip damage. That's pretty good. Because the only time you get chip damage on LFS 4-3 is if heat is active. And if you do the exact same sequence, it's stronger by 4. And of course, if you do a heat dash, it's gonna do way more chip damage, 16. So if we add both moves together, so if I do LFS forward 3 into LFS back 4-3 into another RFF forward 3 into LFS forward 3 into a heat dash, that's how much chip damage you'll see you can do. So that's 40 chip damage in that sequence. Provided, of course, again, that the opponent doesn't press a button. Now, if we throw in CD3 with heat, and we combine that sequence as well, so let's say we do something like CD3 into LFS back 4-3 into RFF forward 3 into LFS forward 3 heat dash. So you got 40 earlier, right? Wow, that's pretty good. But yeah, for as long as you don't have heat, this could be pretty good at like damaging the opponent somewhat. The other thing to compare about these two moves is that, right, LFS forward 3 has space on block. And then CD3, there is no space on block. So you can think of CD3 more as like your pressure tool, because you're gonna do chip damage, right? And then you're right in front of their face, but of course you have to think about whether you're doing LFS back 4-3 or LFS down 4. But like, you're in front of their face. So there's no sidestepping here, there's no backdashing here. I mean, while you can do that, your opponent's more incentivized to like press a button in front of your face compared to when you do LFS forward 3, because there's distance. So one situation, or how it could look, right, is that if they decide to like do a basic challenge with like, let's say a jab, and you do LFS forward 3, and you backdash, that's what you can get. Because you can't get that on like CD3. If you backdash, you're in front of their face. And you can't even sidestep to like any side. I guess you'd be forced to like do LFS back 1, but then like that defeats the purpose of being +4 in front of their face. So you might as well just press a button immediately when you're in CD3. And then when you do LFS forward 3, you can think about it. One way to look at it. Now, the last thing for both these moves that they share is that, right, it's a tricky situation to catch an opponent sidestepping towards either side and even backdashing. You're forced to risk. Before in Tekken 7, you were forced to risk LFS back 3 because LFS back 3 was a homing mid power crush. So if all else failed and you don't know what the opponent's gonna do in either situation, just LFS back 3. But in this game, you can't do that because LFS back 3, it tracks nowhere, right? So if I do it off LFS forward 3, I lose. If I do it off CD3, I lose. It's just bad. So in this game, you're forced to risk your new homing move, which is LFS F4. Now, why is it a risk? Because LFS F4 is a punishable homing move at -10, and it comes out at 17 frames. So if you do the math, 17 minus 4, you're coming out at 13 frames. That's not bad. But the thing is, the fact that it does come out at 17 frames means you're losing to a power crush every single time. So if you're like, oh, I don't know what they're doing, you got hit. So, yeah. But it does beat Backdash, so you're fine. Of course, it loses to like Zafina, but that's like the best Backdash in the game. So for the most part against majority of the cast, if you're not sure, you can always just press LFS F4 to keep them in check. Or like DF3, that's another thing you need to risk. You need to risk a power crush. So if they decide to grab you out of nowhere, remember, power crushes loses to grab, so you're just dead. Or if they decide to like press a low, it is what it is. So yeah, that is how the Flamingo Rocket and CD3 work more or less in Tekken 8 and the differences between the two moves. So that's everything I know about them. Has been the lesson for this video. And I've been Frontier, and thank you for watching.